Welcome back, dude and dudettes, to another wild episode of Send It Mate. We're here to talk about all things hunting and outdoors. And today, we've got something that'll keep your gear running smoother than a dingo's getaway.
That's right. Our show is brought to you by High Caliber, the gun and knife oil company that knows how to keep your firearms and blades in tip-top shape.
High Caliber is like the secret sauce for hunters, anglers, and outdoorsy folk everywhere. It's like the magic potion that makes your gun and knives happier than a dog with two tails.
You know, guys, I've been using High Caliber oil for a while now, and let me tell you, it's the duck's nuts. My rifle practically sings a lullaby when I take it out hunting.
And speaking of lullabies, ever tried sneaking up on a deer with a squeaky gun? It's a prime way to end up with no venison in the freezer. You'll be hungrier than a vegan at a bacon festival.
Absolutely. But with High Caliber oil, your gun will be quieter than a ninja in moonlight. You'll be stalking your prey with the grace and stealth of a mountain lion.
High Caliber doesn't just keep things quiet, it also prevents rust and corrosion, so you won't find your gear looking like it's spent a season at the bottom of a creek.
That's right, and for you knife enthusiasts out there, High Caliber has got you covered too. Your trusty blade will slice through anything smoother than butter on a hot biscuit.
So, folks, don't let your gear become a rusty, squeaky mess. Head on over to highcaliber.com.au and grab a bottle of their oil today.
And if you use the code SENDITMATE at checkout, you'll get a special discount. I say again, use the code SENDITMATE for all your oil slick, stealthy hunting needs.
Thanks to High Caliber, you'll be sending it in style and silence.
So, gear up, oil up, and send it, mate. High Caliber, the ultimate oil for the ultimate hunter.
Welcome, all you good dude and dudettes. I'm Josh.
I'm Caleb.
And I'm Couchy.
Welcome to another episode of Send It Mate podcast. And today we have another guest for you, which I'm very excited to hear from, to be honest.
We're racking them up. I like having guests.
Yeah, same. It's better than hearing you two, that's for sure.
It's a welcome break from your rubbish sometimes, but
Definitely. It gets a little dry in the well when it's just talking between the three of us over and over and over again.
Is that why we only see each other once a week now?
Yeah, pretty much.
well.
Anyway, today's guest is Calem O'Grady.
Hi, how's it going, guys?
Happy to have you on.
Firstly, how was your day? What did you get up to, Caleb?
I've had a pretty chilled day, actually. I went to the doctors, did some bits and bobs. Yeah, no, I've actually had a really, really sedentary day for me. It's been just relaxing.
Fair enough. I saw you had a bit of tattoo work done recently.
That's one of the reasons why I've been relaxing. Yeah, I just had a pretty traumatic tattoo finished. So, yeah, no gym for the past few days. But it's almost done now. It's pretty much finished. Just had my arm coloured in.
It's all black, is it? What does it mean? Or is it tribal peace? Or
Well, to be honest, it doesn't have like a specific meaning. It's not like my birthstone or anything. Like pole. So basically, there was work underneath it. I had a series of tattoos I had done when I was in my 20s by a friend of mine, and I just kind of outgrew it. And I was going to have it lasered, but because it was colour, the laser doesn't bounce off it properly, so it doesn't actually break up the molecules. So I ummed and ahed about it, and then I just thought, you know what, let's just paint it black. And I actually really like it to the point now, if I could go back, I'd probably have it done anyway. Yeah. And there was actually a tattoo that was in a film called From Dusk Till Dawn. I don't know if you've ever seen that film. George Clooney plays the coolest part, and Zeph Gecko, and he's got a bit up his neck. And at the end, he takes his jacket off and he's got this tribal piece. And obviously, it's really passé now, but I actually did a tattooing apprenticeship when I was in my teens. And that was when it was 2 years after the film came out, and everyone was coming in. They were inquiring about the price and stuff. No one ever got it done, and I always thought I'd never have the guts to get it done. And now I've gone and had 10 times as much work. So I've made 15-year-old me really proud.
Was that all in one setting, the cover up?
No, I ended up doing 3-4 hour sittings to get it done, to get it finished up. And the last 4 hour one, I had a tattoo there, which was my first tattoo when I was 13. It is now just a black circle, and I'm going to have something in white over the top of that.
Oh, very
So going
nice.
to sleep was an absolute bitch. I was like, ow, ow, backwards and forwards. Killer.
Oh, dear.
I mean, I've got no tattoo, so I can't relate on any level, but I imagine it would have been painful to sit there and cop all of that.
Yeah, it tingled for sure. I mean, so a lot of people get tiny tattoos and say that tattoos don't hurt, but this is like 36 spread. I think he used a 24, so it's 24 needles in a row, and it's just 4 hours of him drilling in ink. And there's a big biker dude that I go to, and he just sits there mercilessly scrubbing at my arm.
What was the most painful part?
Oh, for sure. It's like here on the elbow, these little bits.
Yeah.
The actual elbow itself definitely tingles, but just on the side here.
So like your
Yeah.
funny bone sort of thing.
Oh, it's extra special. I mean, it's quite painful inside here, but as he was working his way down, you could feel it building and building and building. And I just took everything in me just to sit there and breathe out, try and look tough in front of the biker.
Bloody hell. That's commitment.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Whereabouts in our great land can we find you tonight, Calem?
I'm currently in Victoria, so down on the south coast in Torquay.
Oh, good spot.
very
My,
nice.
my
Very
sister's
good
in Torquay as we speak as well, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know why she's there. I just see it on Instagram. This is the thing, like, you don't talk to your sister for a week and then she pops up in Torquay. So,
Well, this is one of the things, like keeping up with you, Calem, is you move around a lot. And the reason, like prior to starting the podcast, I asked, where are you at the moment sort of thing, is because one moment you'll be in SA, the next minute you'll be in Darwin, et cetera, et cetera. So it's quite difficult to be like, oh, where is he?
Yeah, we talked about me doing it when I was in Far Northern NT. Then we confirmed it, and I was in SA, and now I'm in Victoria. So I've gone from one side of the country to the other in the conversation period.
I've got to ask you, what takes you around Australia?
Predominantly work, really. So I teach bushcraft and survival skills. That's my profession. Nowadays, I was a chef many years ago. Quite a few years ago, I got into bushcraft and survival skills, and that takes me around quite a bit. But also, I work with Ernie Dingo, running something he calls Camping on Country, which is going to remote Indigenous communities and working on men's physical, mental, and cultural health, which is pretty awesome. And that's super privileged position I'm in, to be able to go to these amazing communities and
With
learn about
Ernie
their way.
Dingo.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I used to watch him growing up all the time. Bloody hell. He'd be getting on now, wouldn't he?
He is a fighting fit 66, I believe he is now. Not at this birthday, the birthday last year he spent just with me on the road. Like, I took him out for food and we went and played the pokies for like 3 hours because that's all he wanted to do. Just fancy dinner and pokies date. But no, I mean, he's got 5-year-old twin boys, He's still working hard. He's still, enjoying life. We go out, we go into the communities, and he's got an axe and he can swing an axe better than I have ever been able to. And he's still as if he was in his 30s, the way he moves around.
yeah, wow. So, Calem, you've got a bit of a background on TV with the Outback Lockdown show. Is any of this being filmed? Is this just for the cause?
No. I mean, this is something that so the production company that Outback Lockdown filmed with found out I was doing this, and they were, all over it, wanting to make a show out of it. But the thing is, if you started bringing cameras in, I mean, we take an Aboriginal doctor with us where we can, because they don't even trust doctors generally in a lot of these remote communities. We start rolling in with cameras, the impact that we have in the communities just wouldn't be there. I mean, Ernie runs these yarning circles. So the men open up, they talk about the things that have happened in their life, and 90% of stories contain addiction, abuse, murder. All in every story, there's these tales. There's tears of joy from releasing the stress, and it's just an amazing experience. And we wouldn't have that impact if we tried to televise it, for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how did they go with you being, they obviously pick up the accent that you're not from Australia originally and all that sort of stuff. Is it under the guidance of Ernie that they sort of accept you as well, or is it a bit of a struggle?
I'm Ernie Dingo's friend. I'm just call my instantly, straight away.
Yeah. Nice. That works well.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Bloody hell. I've heard like many stories about how like tough some of the children that get treated out in the communities. It doesn't sound like a terribly great upbringing at times.
I mean, it depends. I mean, it differs from community to community. I think there's this misconception that we have an Aboriginal people like it's one. It's like saying the European people. You know, it's like comparing people from Spain and people from Italy.
Mm-hmm.
They are more similar, I would say, than if you compare a community from far northern Queensland and another one from southern Northern Territory, let's say. Mm. I mean, you've got 300 active languages, as many diverse cultures, ways, and it's so it's different all around. Some have got it tough, some they're having a spectacular time, and it's just like living free. Yeah. I found that with me when I spent time just living off the land in the bush. The things that get you down is all the tap that follows life. You know, it's all other people, your job, your arguments, the going out, the this, the that, the that. When you just worry about your family, your loved ones, and your immediate survival, there's nothing to worry about. Like depression doesn't exist. It's just
It's interesting you say that, because I often, if I'm having a bit of a dark day, that's often where I sort of reflect, and that's the point I get to of thinking, well, how much easier would it be if, and I often say to my missus, I'm like, I wish I was just living in a cabin in the woods and all I have to worry about is, you know, getting food for the day and, you know, upgrading the cabin sort of thing, and not having to deal with the politics of life and the media and all that sort of stuff. Life would just be so much simpler. And I think that's probably what we're designed more so to do and live like, rather than the complications of a modern life.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the problem is that we instinctively crave comfort, and that is something which is a double-edged sword, because though it's obviously better for our initial immediate survival, it actually has a lot more negative repercussions. You know, like the idea of the cabin in the woods is a dream that a lot of people have for those very reasons. You know, you get to get rid of the stresses and woes of life, but it comes with its own challenges, which aren't as detrimental to your state of mind, as in like your state of depression, but it is detrimental to the fact that you're freezing your ass off every morning before you make the fire. You're like, the slightest thing, like a really bad rain, can just really ruin your time when it comes at the wrong time. I mean, big winds were a massive deal because we had a rooftop tent that we had on top of an old water collection thing next to Stone Cottage, and when the wind blew, like, you're just up all night. No doubt about it.
I think we're probably talking to the perfect person with having done Outback Lockdown, like that extended period, out roughing it. How long was that total, you know, time you're out there?
7 months.
Oh, wow.
7 months all up. It was for professional reasons. We had work to do and other ventures. The initial time that they actually filmed, we got out there and they arrived, and they probably only spent 3 weeks initially, and then they came back for pickups and did another couple of weeks with us. So it was only the very, very beginning of the time we spent out there. But we just stayed there for the whole of the major part of the pandemic.
Did you do many runs into town for food, or was it?
No, there was no runs into town for food per se. So we had, strangely, so my partner Kai, survivalist, TV, she's got quite a few accolades in the survival world. Well, when we came to Australia, I was initially going to go and meet Kai in the States. She was on a ranch. It was her friend who's also on Naked and Afraid, does quite a few of that. She was seeing a country and western singer who was from the States, and he had a massive compound in Georgia. He's been waiting for the apocalypse. You know, he's been fortifying the place for the zombies, and he couldn't wait. He's like, get him to come here. He can stay here, and we'll ride whatever this is out. You know. I was like, sweet. He's got an amazing gun collection. Everyone had mandatory training every day from a marksman guy who was there. I couldn't wait to get there. And my ticket was cancelled last minute. So pretty gutted because Trump closed the borders, and my visa for Australia was still valid. And I was going to come here for 2 weeks was the plan. 2 weeks. And we were going to go and stay on 36,000 acres in SA. And turned into now I live here.
Very good.
It's funny how things happen.
Pretty cool,
Well, that's,
isn't it?
That's yeah, it is pretty cool. It's probably the opportune time to roll out the question one, which is where are you from?
I'm from England originally, so I'm from the southwest. It's a harbour town called Bristol, which is home of Banksy the street artist,
Oh, yeah.
Blackbeard the pirate, the first ever suspension bridge, and the first ever solid chocolate bar made by Fry's.
Oh,
We've
wow.
got all the big accolades in Bristol.
That's awesome.
Very cool. Now, what was it like growing up there? And how long before you I guess, came out to Australia? Like, what was the age then?
So, I mean, it was great. I had a mixture of countryside and living in the city. So I was born quite urban, like kind of suburban, really, in a little kind of area that was essentially a little mining town within the city, I suppose you'd call it, or it was way back when. Really nice. And then moved out to the countryside, just like living like a feral kid, as you would, living out in the country. And then I moved back into the city and lived in the inner city for my late teens, mid to late teens, and up into my 20s. But I always kind of skipped backwards and forwards and went back to the country. And then I came out to Australia about 5 years ago for a bit, just visiting, spent a lot of time going out to awesome restaurants and just spending time meeting my friends who were Aussie from England, and then moved out here 3 years ago.
During this time in your teens, you were doing your chef's apprenticeship?
No, it was a bit of a random one. So as I say, I did a bit of a tattooing apprenticeship when I was late 13 until I was about just before I was 15. Did that for a bit. Unfortunately, the guy passed away who was teaching me, so that put an end to that. And then I started studying. I wanted to study biology, to be an entomologist, like insects and stuff. I was just really exotic pets, like collected tarantulas, and I wanted some animal-based job, really. I was going to do insects. And I got a job just washing dishes, doing a bit of kitchen prep. Loved the lifestyle and just loved eating, loved cooking. So I got into that way.
Oh, very nice. Is it as rough in the kitchens over there as what TV makes it out to be? Well, Gordon
100%.
Ramsay.
So, Gordon Ramsay, he's a caricature nowadays. He's larger than life, but it all came from. So after he was at Harvey's with Marco Pierre White and he was on TV, he did a TV show of his own restaurant, and there was a hidden camera, and it's brutal the way that he treats these chefs. But like life was brutal. I was in the time. I mean, there's too much like safe spaces and things like that nowadays. You couldn't get away with it. But it was like the army, and I was in the kind of last era where, there was violence still in the kitchen. People would like getting hit by a pan. I've been cut before with knives by another chef and had stuff thrown at me, and it's pretty savage.
Was it intentional that another chef would cut you, or was this accidental?
Well, no, it was intentional. We were having a disagreement about something, and it was kind of a half. Was it joking? No, it was pretty serious. But there was a giggle on the end of it, and then he threatened me. He kind of brandished a knife, and I told him to go on. Then, and he went on then and cut my forearm.
Yeah, right.
My old boy used to be a chef actually, and he was chef for I think 25 years or something, and then he gave it up when I was probably about 10. And he used to tell a story about a chef who threw a knife at another chef, and the other guy was facing away, and the handle hit him in the back. So another half rotation, it would have just gone straight into his back. And needless to say, my old man got out of it just because it was such a high stress, high tempo, and he had a mild heart attack. I think at like 35 or something. So it's definitely a young man's game for sure. It's the lifestyle that comes with it as well. I mean, you've got to be a borderline alcoholic just to socialize. You're expected. It's one of the only professions where your boss insists that you go out and get drunk before you've got to go into work and do 16-hour day. In a lot of places, in a lot of cases, you feel obligated. Yeah, wow.
Yeah. How do you operate doing that?
I couldn't fathom doing that.
Having said that, plenty of bush camp, like deer hunting camp meals are done pretty intoxicated, I guess. They taste good at the time.
That's why they taste good, because you can't taste them properly.
For sure, yeah.
Well, we're on the subject of food. You've kind of covered off on question 3, which is what your first job, but let's go for question 2 and get that one done, which is, what is your favourite food?
Well, it's definitely going to be game meat for sure. I mean, that was the cuisine that I wanted to specialize in. I didn't really get the option in a lot of places. In one place that was amazing, that I did get a lot of opportunity to prep up wild game. This is before I really got into hunting properly. Yeah, we had a guy who used to come in, dodgiest guy in the world. Like, we always used to joke that he's definitely killed people. He used to come in, he was some poacher guy, and he'd just be like, "Right, mate, I've got 2 deer. Don't ask." Like, okay, cool. And the head chef, he was paying like 50 quid for 2 deer. You know, he didn't have any questions. And I was always quick to prep the game. So one day there'd be 50 pigeons, another day there'd be 20 rabbits, and I'd just be there happy as Larry prepping it up. But yeah, so I mean, definitely game. I mean, of the game animals, probably venison is one of my top ones. And also wood pigeon is definitely up there.
Where do you rate kangaroo?
Oh, if you would have asked me 4 years ago, I would have said it's enjoyable. I had to pull the pin. I don't eat it anymore.
It's a bit
Not at all.
Same as me, really. I sort of used to kind of like it. The backstraps weren't too bad. But then now it's just, nah.
It gets old quickly.
Yeah, real quick.
Yeah. Because we were eating just meat. So we were eating carnivore the whole time that we were out there for the 7 months. I'd already started it. So it was about a year for me altogether. But breakfast, lunch, and dinner, nothing but kangaroo is savage.
Yeah. I mean, we've mentioned on the podcast, when we were kids in the 90s, kangaroo was dirt cheap. So growing up with not much money, we ate it all the time. And now it's expensive but you do get sick of it if you have it too much, for sure.
I think it tastes terrible, to be honest. I think it's absolutely terrible. And the tail, I don't know why people like the tail, but all right.
What's your favourite way of preparing game meat?
It depends on the setting. And when I was with the remote Indigenous communities, a lot of it was Cop Murray. So you dig a pit and line it with some. Well, usually the best thing to use is actually termite mound, but you line it with rocks, preferably termite mound, and that really retains the heat really well. Make a large fire. When that goes out and you've just got the coals, layer of leaves. Something wattle is great because it flavors the meat. So like lemon scented gum or something works wonderful. And then the meat, and then you put some more leaves on top. If you've got paper bark around, then paper bark, and then you cover it with sand, leave it for 4 hours, come back, and everything's just perfectly cooked. So just the whole experience, for the cooking experience, I definitely say traditional pit oven.
Nice. Is it just on the leaves thing, in case someone does try that, is there anything not to use?
There is, and I'm glad you've asked.
Yeah, I had a feeling.
So you don't want to use ironwood at all. So there's ironwood, which not to be confused with iron bark. There's loads of great uses for. I mean, it's a really strong wood. They're used for lances, affixed into spears. But there's also a substance called milk, which is on the root system, that you have to warm up the root system and scrape it off, and it's like an adhesive, and also like a plastic. You just pound it out and keep it warm, keep pounding it, and it's like warm plasticine, but it dries like plastic. It's amazing for handles, for tools and stuff. And we were making spears, and a guy said to me, and English was like his 4th language, so he didn't really know what he was saying. He said, "Oh, don't burn it because it'll make you sick." As I was heating it up to take off the resin, I said, "Okay, cool." And then another guy who spoke fluent English said, "Oh yeah, if you burn it, it'll make you sick, and it makes women miscarry. It's like women have a miscarriage from burning the wood. So eating the leaves kills livestock. You've got to be really careful. So I definitely wouldn't put that in your pit oven for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, if that taints the meat, you're going to know about it.
That's crazy. Is that sort of the only thing that you'd avoid?
Not the only thing. There are a few other things. I mean, there's lots of stuff in the bush which is pretty deadly. I mean, you don't want to get any gidgee beans mixed up in your leaves for sure. Actually, I say that, I take that back, because that does render inert when it gets to 65 degrees. But there are definitely other things out there that you want to be careful with. Something resinous, that's going to taint the meat quite a bit.
Most
Anything too much resin.
Most people just avoid eating anything that looks like a berry in Australia because it's just like, nah, it's going
half
to
of
kill
them are poisonous.
Sure.
Is there anything in learning some of these traditional food preparation methods? Is there anything that really took you by surprise in how the Indigenous people do it?
Not particularly. I wouldn't say take me by surprise in the way they do it. I suppose maybe the kind of what I see is quite a cavalier attitude to things that Westerners see as like sacred cows, you know? Like the stuff that I've eaten with them is not only some things that would make your toes curl, but other things that you think to yourself, they're not supposed to be eaten there. Like sea turtle eggs, for instance, just being up on the northern coast. I think it was Pomperau I was in, and we were by the beach. Maybe it was Wadder. I think it might have been Wadder, actually. And we're on the beach, and I wake up in the morning, and I go out, and I can see the footprints where the turtles have come up to lay their eggs the night before. And there's dingo footprints where the dingoes have been investigating. And I felt like I was in this magical land. I went and told the elders, and they looked at each other and just ran to the beach and digged up the eggs.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, what? And yeah, it's just the dinner bell, you know? It was,
Can't say I wouldn't turn it down if someone offered it to me.
oh, of course.
Why not?
So I did. I tried it, and I wanted to try it cooked, and everyone was telling me you just need to eat them raw. And I thought, no way. But the white of the egg is basically just seawater. It's not like the white membrane you get in a normal egg. And the yolk of the egg is really, really thick and creamy. So when it cooks, it's like a little pebble, which is horrible. And you just get this kind of seawater water around it. But when you eat them raw, the seawater is almost like eating an oyster. You know, you get that little bit of water which almost seasons it. And you get this really creamy yolk. And fortunately, I'm told, the embryos weren't crunchy yet. So they get a little bit crunchy when they're a bit older. They were just like a little jelly bean.
Oh, there's a tortoiseshell.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Like the turtles.
Oh, yeah, the way they do, I've seen them do fish on shows and things. They'll just put them on hot coals as well, not wrapping them in anything, and then just peel the flesh away and eat them. They don't even gut them, nothing like that. Is that with scales on or scales off?
It's as little prep as necessary. I mean, I started doing things like I started to scale it, and they looked at me like I was an idiot. You know, it's just like, well, what are you doing? Just chuck it straight on the fire. Like I was going to fillet it and do some stuff one evening, and they're like, what are you doing? And just chucked it straight on the coals, and then the whole thing gets peeled back and just eaten straight there, like straight on the coals. They just flip it over, and as the other side's cooking, they're ripping off the top side and eating it straight off the fire.
Okay.
Bloody hell.
It's efficient.
No messing around.
Sounds like a waste of time. I got to ask, Calem, have you had a witchetty grub?
I have. I had probably the biggest witchetty grub I've seen. The first one I had I've never seen one as big. It was the size of like a butcher's traditional sausage. It was humongous.
Wow.
It's like really early back in my Instagram. I've got a video of it, but it was spectacularly large. And they're pretty delicious. They could do with a bit of salt, but they take on the flavor of whatever they've been in. So there's a real nuttiness from the gum that it was living in. It was lovely.
Yeah. Is there a particular section you are and aren't supposed to eat? Because inevitably, anyone digs one up here in Adelaide, they're like, oh yeah, eat it. But you know, it never goes down well.
I think it's all game. I mean, there's two main sections really. There's the head and the rest, and I usually hold the head and eat the rest and discard the head because it's just a bit the business end, isn't it? You know.
Yeah.
But that's it. I mean, the thing is, strangely or interestingly, when settlers first came here and started harvesting the mussels from the water's edge, all the Aboriginal people sneered at them because they couldn't understand why they would want to eat them. They thought they were disgusting, and they went and gathered witchetty grubs for them to say, no, eat this. Don't eat those disgusting mussels. Eat these.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
It's funny how it works out, but it's all down to personal preference in the end, I guess.
Mussels or witchetty grubs? I don't know which one I'm going to choose.
I've got to try a witchetty grub because I've seen them and I've thought about it, but never actually done it. So,
if you do try, if you get the opportunity as well, try cooking it. If you're a little bit grossed out by the fact that it's just basically a balloon full of pus.
Yeah.
Try
You're really selling it.
try rolling it on the coals first. It does great. It's like an eggy sausage. Is the best way to describe it when it's
Okay.
cooked.
Still not doing anything for an eggy sausage. Oh dear.
I'm keen to try a cooked one, not a raw one.
How long would you cook it for?
Like seconds, less than a minute.
It's
You
like
just
quick sear.
get it on. Yeah, so softwood coals are probably better. So like the white ones, and just when they're hot, just give it a roll over. You don't want to go crazy with it, and just give it a sear. Cooks pretty quickly.
Oh, we'll have to try it.
Have you tried cooking them with like in a dish with something to jazz it up?
I'm thinking about writing a cookbook and having it location by location and doing it kind of in a kind of fine dining kind of way with like make a coulis from some local berries but I think it would go really well as a starter, in a posh restaurant for sure.
That's I like that idea because the survival books I've seen, it's all American or European, and I haven't really seen many that are Australian. So I'll be keen. I'll check it
Well,
out.
on that note, the survival books, my partner's just released Survive, which is a survival book. It's kind of worldwide, but a lot of it pertains to Australian bush.
Nice.
For sure.
What's it called? Oh, for survive. But yeah,
Survive.
yep. I heard it. It just didn't register.
Yeah, short and sweet, just Survive.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Just back on the venison. Do you have a preference in the species of deer? Because we have a bit of a debate amongst ourselves. Red, Chital, fallow, who likes what, and people. I mean, it's pretty evenly split, really, again amongst everything. So, do you have a favourite?
Personally, I think it's age over species, and I must be honest, I can't tell the difference massively. If someone didn't tell me beforehand, I'd struggle. You can tell how old it is. You can definitely tell by the cut. If you get a strip loin and it's older, it's not going to be not as nice as if it's a younger specimen.
Mm.
But then with age comes flavor, so there's a nice balance. I think like 2-3 years old is like a perfect gaminess to tenderness ratio, depending on the species. The deer I've eaten the most is going to be obviously fallow. I've eaten a lot of fallow. In the UK, a lot of roe deer.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, we get loads of roes, loads of muntjac. Yeah, I've eaten a lot of those. I think they're a bit more bland but tender as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, just a big red, I like the feeling. I like the knowledge when I'm eating it. I just feel like it's a more mighty, majestic meal because of the species.
Maybe that's what it is. I like red as well. Yeah.
I think it's like the texture of red as well. Just it's very steak-like in my mind. Anyway, that's how it feels when I eat it. Anyway,
Just to sort of go on, like we had a Kiwi guest on, and she rated fallow over red, and us here we rate red over fallow. So for fallow, for example, depending on the country or where it's from, do you find it tastes a lot different?
No, I don't. I really don't. I'd love to. Maybe I should. I should feel like I should have more of a feeling about the difference. I mean, the thing that it's grazing on is going to make a difference to the meat, but I really don't get it personally. I don't have a massive. I can't tell the difference.
Okay.
If I'm honest.
your partner was a vegan, vegetarian or vegan at one stage?
My what, sorry?
Your partner?
She was a vegetarian for years, like 15 or 16 years. Yeah.
Yes. Did you always been a meat eater?
Always been a meat eater. I did actually, because I mean, when I first started hunting, before I started hunting, I wasn't actually from like a hunting background, and it took me a while to come to terms with doing it. And I did tell myself if I couldn't do it, I wasn't going to be a hypocrite, and I just wouldn't eat meat. But no, never. I've always been a keen carnivore.
Very nice, very nice. I found that surprising when Kite spoke about that on the show, being a vegetarian, and now she's a hunter, and it's like, oh, yeah, that's a pretty big switch from one side to the other.
Yeah, she's not just a meat eater. She's pretty much pure carnivore. There are times when we're in the city and like we go to a nice restaurant and I just want to cook something that's got something in it, she'll dabble. But I mean, she almost eats like a kid, like, pushes her broccoli around, doesn't want to eat it. When it used to be her favorite meat, favorite food. Sorry.
What sort of converted it to meat?
Health was the big factor. she started hearing things like she did stunts for 16 years. So she was banging up her body. Her recovery time was really poor, and her health wasn't great. I think we're in this era where veganism and vegetarianism, but veganism for sure is only it's in its adolescence, is very young.
Yeah.
And we're going to see people come forward very soon that are going to tell you that it doesn't work. Like, I personally don't believe the hype with veganism. And it's not just because I hunt and because I eat meat. I mean, you just have to look in history. There's never once been a civilization that's been vegan. And that tells you something. I think that we really need meat for our state of mind as well as our body as well.
Yep.
I kind of find that vegans are always depressed, and I think that's like something which is innate within them, which tells them they're failing as human beings because they're not eating meat. There's something that when you'd get meat as a tribal people, it would be a time for celebration. The hunters would come back and everyone would dance and celebrate, and it would be a joyous occasion. And the longer you ate vegetables, the worse things were getting for your people. So I think, there's something about it.
That makes sense because salad ain't too exciting.
Right.
No, it's not.
Well, I've heard veganism being described as you're basically denying yourself something that's ingrained in your DNA just about. So of course that's going to make you feel
It's kind of like living
like
in
you're
the city.
missing something.
Kind of like living in the city where you're sort of depriving yourself from nature.
It's kind of like working a job where I'd rather be living in that cabin in the woods. Something like that. Well, that's a good segue into our next question, Calem, which is, if you could trade places with anyone in the world, who would that be?
Do you know what? I've honestly got to say nobody, because I don't know. When you trade places, do you mean entirely? Because you don't know where other people are at. And I find you think about how rich someone is or how well they seem to be doing, it's not enough. It doesn't actually make someone particularly happy. And my life's pretty cool, and I'm a pretty happy person generally. So I don't think I'd want to. I think it'd be one of those monkey paw situations where you'd actually, there's always going to be a detriment, which is worse. I think if everyone, what's that saying? If everyone threw their troubles into the middle of the room, you can almost guarantee that you'd want to just take yours back.
That's
true. I like it.
It's very heavy. Yeah.
We really need to change that question and just
the counter that
Well,
question,
limit it.
because a lot of people do just want to live their own life. If you could just do it for a day or a week, just to try someone's life or change something, what do you reckon?
Oh, if I could try someone's life or change something, who would it be? I mean, right now, I would be really interested to know what's going on with Kanye West. I mean, that's got to be an interesting existence.
I think he does as well, mate.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Word comes to mind. SHIT show. Or
Yeah,
something.
right.
Other than, hey.
why did you say it, man?
Oh, just trying to keep it PG.
I think people can spell, Josh.
Yeah.
No, that's it'd be interesting to see what goes on in his head. I mean, I did listen to the episode he did with Joe Rogan, which was 3 hours, and it made a lot more sense what he was saying in that, because it's the long form. He can unpack his conversation properly rather than the little, soundbite that the media do and make, skew something in a direction. But he's still a unique individual, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of level of fame is always going to mess people up. But I think also as well, there's a lot that goes on when you get to that level of fame that I think you are expected to toe the line a lot. And if you are slightly mental in your hubris and how you think that you're supposed to be this messiah-like figure for the people, and then people are nudging you and telling you that, hang on a minute, that's not the way things work, I think he's just spiraling out of control, I think it's just, and it's getting to this point now where he's just doing really well at sabotaging himself. It's crazy what's going on.
Yeah.
Weird.
Is there anyone you've met who's famous that's left a real impression on you?
I don't really. I've never really been that into. I mean, I suppose I could say Ernie. Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually know he's famous when we met, but just he's so humble and such an interesting character. The way he travels through life and what he's accomplished from where he's come from. He's got an amazing story. But I don't really. I've met some famous people. I don't really see them as anything other than just other people. I don't know. They don't really imprint on me as much. That much.
how is you've obviously got your own TV show. How is, I guess, the level of fame that's brought with it? How's that affected you personally?
Oh, not at all, really. I mean, I've taken myself out of my old existence, really. So, I mean, people message me, and I know that it's been airing in the UK, but I've not been there. And because I spend so much time out in the bush, I mean, if I'm in community, they don't care. And yeah, my partner's substantially more famous, like famous in her own right for other things. So, but she's really humble about it, and it doesn't really affect our day-to-day lives. I mean, people recognize me sometimes. Funnily, more people recognize me from the show than Kai because I think I've got more standout features. Um,
Like a
but yeah,
full black arm.
yeah, and all that. But the bald head and beard's pretty obvious.
Yeah, true. The guy with the circle on his shoulder.
Yeah.
You're just making yourself more recognisable, mate. All right. Well, next question. What's the most dangerous thing you've ever done?
What's the most dangerous thing I've ever done? I mean, to be honest, I try and do at least one dangerous thing a month, I reckon. I mean, we do dangerous things all the time for fun. I don't know why. I'm just drawn to doing things that are dangerous. I think it might be I should get myself tested because I'm always doing stupid stuff. I really am. So like we do a lot of climbing. So we do a lot of traditional climbing just with little pieces of kit that go in between the rock, and we free climb like 180 meters and stuff for fun. Like when we go out, we do multiple day hunts, and we'll go, we just won't bother taking this, or let's try and take as little as we can, and then you're just like freezing your ass off, and then you think, you know what, maybe a sleeping bag would have been a good idea. We knew it was going to be minus weather, probably a good. So yeah, couldn't put my finger on it. Just a lot of stuff generally. Yeah, I mean, well, when we were filming the show during Outback lockdown, we had no real provisions. The only reason we were going into town is because we had to fuel up. So we did use a vehicle to get around. It's 36,000 acres. A lot of it was on foot, but we had the vehicle for going backwards and forwards. The closest person was 5 k's away, and that was Kai's cousin, who was on the property. He runs sheep. He was going through 8 years of drought at the time, so there was little to no natural water sources or vegetation for us if we needed it, even though we weren't really eating it. And the closest town was 50 k's away.
Yep.
So putting ourselves in that situation, there were times when we just run out of food, or we'd overuse our fuel supply, and we drive into town and we were looking at the gauge the whole way because we were running on fumes. But the problem is we've been really lucky, and I think that's to our downfall as well, because we're like, we could do that again.
So, like, the town was the closest point of medical help from that time as well? Yeah. That's a long way for, like, a snake bite or...
It is, and the browns
serious.
were right. We ended up eating one of them that we accidentally got killed as we were driving in, but they were just everywhere. You couldn't go. And I nearly picked one up because I've got this love affair with messing around with dangerous animals, or just animals generally. And I saw a little yellow snake with a red dot on its head. And I was like, this is amazing. Look at this cool little snake. And I didn't think for a second, for some reason, that it was going to be anything. As I went down, Kai went to kick my hand. She's like, no, that's a kick my hand with her flip-flop shoe. She didn't even have any shoes, any boots on. She's like, no, that's a baby brown snake. And the problem is they are actually more dangerous than adult brown snakes, as I'm sure you know. So, that was just a day-to-day thing. You'd go along and you'd see a piece of corrugated steel, and you could almost guarantee there was going to be one under there. It was
something.
It was a big
something just says in your head though when you see bits of sheet of iron on the ground or something. Pick it up and have a look. it's like telling a kid not to do it. You're like, yeah, I'm doing it.
That's
good.
That's like lived for 12 months in Minterby, so top of SA, and walked probably about 3 feet away from like a 4 or 5 foot inland taipan. And then I researched it afterwards, and if they didn't bite you, you've got minutes.
Yeah.
And the closest point to that was, I think, 30 odd K out to Marla. But it's quite sort of, I don't know, I guess humbling in that sort of situation that it could happen real easy.
Yeah, it does make me appreciate life. I think most people go around thinking that life's safe. There's safety signs on everything, and you are led to believe by society that you're being looked after. And it's situations like that that make you realize that that's just it's a fallacy, and you should appreciate every day. It makes you enjoy it a bit more.
100%.
The cattle station up north that you work on, that's obviously going to be pretty dangerous at times too. You got any stories about that?
Oh yeah, I mean that place was just a day-to-day occurrence. I mean, they had everything there. There's so many crocodiles. I mean, we don't. Well, I say we. I was just there doing a few months. There was it was the place where Sarah Henderson was. She's a famous writer. 500,000 acre station up there. I had some time. I'd applied to go on a loan, is what it was mainly. So I was all set to go. I was in the final stages of casting. I'd spoken to someone. It was about to go down, and I just didn't get in. So I was a bit bummed about that, and I had some time to kill then. Kai was off to the States to film an episode of Naked and Afraid that coincided at the same time, and I just ended up. I was looking for an adventure job, and they just had someone quit last minute, and it was taking people to see Aboriginal artwork, going up in helicopters, finding crocodiles, and just basically they gave me a GXL Land Cruiser and told me to show millionaires a good time.
Yeah,
That's pretty much what it was. But it was crazy. So you'd get up in the morning and you'd walk past where the poddy calves were, the calves that had been abandoned by their mother, and there'd just be like entrails and what's left of a calf where the dingoes had broken in the middle of the night, in the middle of the homestead, and just murdered one of the calves. And you're just like, oh, we better move that before the kids come to feed them. And like I got up one day and I went in and they had a border collie called Barney. And I'm like, where's Barney gone? And like, oh yeah, he got eaten by a crocodile yesterday. Just mad stuff like that was constant.
Just everyday life up there.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
It's interesting you mentioned Alone. I was actually going to ask you, given that you and Kai between you have done a few different shows, Alone we're obsessed with ever since I found out about it. It is a top show, and it's interesting to see you applied for it. But I got, I think, about 3/4 of the way through the application process for the Australian one. I was just like, then it required all the video portion. I'm like, this is a lot of hard work, and I didn't have the time. So I ended up giving. But if you didn't get on, how have I got a chance?
I'd like to see you in Vancouver Island, fucking on that show. You'd be dead in 24 hours, I reckon.
I don't know. I don't know where they were going to do the Australian one though. Do you know? Do you happen to know?
Yeah, it was Tassie. They went with, I believe it was
cold.
I knew they were going to go for cold, and they wouldn't tell us initially, but I'm pretty certain. I was presuming because obviously, as a non-Indigenous person, you're relying on feral animals, aren't you? Really, if you're going to get meat, it's going to be deer. And I thought, Kosciuszko Way is going to be the best place for that.
Yep.
And of course, you're not supposed to bow hunt in. Is it you can't bow hunt in Tasmania?
Tassie, yeah.
True.
I'm thinking, how are they going to give you a bow? It's not going to work. But I think they did go with Tassie. Maybe they got special permission in the end. It's definitely going to be the coldest place because they wanted to keep with the cold narrative. So
True.
Yeah.
I guess that's probably the biggest shock to most Aussies. They'd be used to heat. So if you're going to make it extreme for an Australian, put them in the cold.
Well,
Sure.
I don't know. Living in the middle of South Australia would be pretty fucking damning too.
Heat sucks. I'd rather cold, but yeah.
God. I mean, yeah, it's easier to start a fire, in the heat, but yeah.
yeah, I actually would rather have the cold because my biggest bane is the mozzies and the sandflies and stuff, man. If you give me an option of getting bitten all night by mozzies or freezing my ass off, I'll light fire every single time, for sure.
Yeah. And then cold, the snakes are dormant.
Yeah.
That's another positive.
yeah.
Deer out.
Talking about fire, actually, you're a bit of a guru at starting fire with sticks.
One of my favorite disciplines of survival, for sure, yeah.
Yeah. I've watched some of your videos that you've done on it, man. You actually make it look easy. I think every time I've tried it, just you give up and you just pull out a big lighter. Yeah. But you did mention something, and that's there's few native species of wood that are usable for starting fire.
Well, traditionally there are two, because the method that's used by Aboriginal people is, arguably there is some record of them using a fire plow, which is the actual rubbing of two sticks together. But hand drill, where you spin a spindle into a half board, is the traditional method of Aboriginal people. And it differs depending on where you are. So if you're in the south, you've got xanthia or grass tree or blackboard tree. And the spindle that grows out of the middle, they use that for the half board and the spindle. And if you go to the north, it's coastal hibiscus, which is arguably there are some other nice trees, but it's probably the best wood in the world for making a friction fire. So they're the only two woods that were really owned. And interestingly, when I was on my travels with the Aboriginal communities, I heard a tale of it. Apparently as well, there was a community that used to hold, or I don't know if it's just one, but they would hold the next community to ransom, and they wouldn't give them the technology. So they wouldn't let them have the woods or the know-how, and they would trade physical fire. So they would have to send a boy with fish or something to trade, and they'd give them some burning tinder of some description, and they'd have to bring that back, and they'd have to keep the fire going 24 hours a day. Because if those coals went out, they'd have to send a boy to go and trade for some more.
It's crazy.
Wow.
Australian commerce. Boom.
I love it. That's cool.
You got any tips for anyone that wants to have a crack at making fire with a couple bits of wood?
Yeah, I did a video on doing it. So one of the best techniques is bow drill. So you add, I say best, one of the easiest. You can add more bits of kit. The main thing is getting to know your materials. You know, if you don't know tinder, if you don't know how to make a decent tinder bundle, what's going to burn in what situations, how to dry it out, how to prepare, use a next fire mentality, you're never going to be able to do it. That's the most important bit. The actual physical technique, I know a lot of people, I've taught a lot of people how to actually physically make the fire, and they feel like they've cracked it, but you put them into a real dynamic situation, and that's not good enough. Yeah, you really need to know what woods work. I've been doing a lot of experiments with native woods, and they can be a bit denser. So the black wattle works really well. We've managed to get it out of cypress pines, so they'll work. They're pretty resinous, but they will work. And in fact, we did manage with one of the flowering gums to make a bow drill fire, but that was really hard. I mean, that's up there with using maple wood to try and get a fire. But yeah, it does work. But yeah, knowing your woods is the best thing I can recommend. But yeah, if you want to know, anyone wants to know, I've got a video on my Instagram that goes through it in 1 minute, exactly how to stand and sit and everything. It's all about the fine details.
I think some photos of the wood to use, or the plant or tree itself, to help identify them, because you mentioned a few trees, and I'm like, I can't picture in my head what they look like. But yeah, I think that'd be pretty hard, because we just go along and pick up some gum and just be like, yep, give it a go. It's not working.
Fortunately, I don't think we've been in that situation where we've had to life or death make a fire.
Yeah, bit glider in the pocket everywhere.
That is the best thing I recommend. You know, if you're going out, make sure you've got a beer or two.
Easy. All right. Well, next question is, what is the best piece of advice you've been given, Calem?
Wow, that's really put me on the spot. What's the best piece of advice I've ever been given? Yeah, you've stumped me there. I couldn't put my finger on one piece of advice, the best piece of advice I've ever been given.
Might be, piece of bushcraft advice or life in general. People generally go back to their parents and say, mum told me this back in the day.
Well, that's a good one. What about, I don't know, Soldiers 5 on what berries not to eat in Australia? There you go. That's a good bit of advice.
What berries not to buy? I recommend not eating any of them, for sure. Yeah, that's a good piece of advice. Don't eat the berries. Don't eat any of them. You're in for a bad time.
What about, speaking of eating stuff and what not to eat, what about mushrooms?
100%. It's one of my favorite extreme sports, wild mushroom eating. I've got two friends who I learn a lot of my mushroom knowledge from. They're Matt and Joey. Now, Matt is the kind of guy who's like, chuck it in the pan, see how it goes. And Joey's the one who's like, whoa, don't eat that, don't eat that. He'll only eat things he really, really knows about. And what happens is I go foraging and I'm Matt. And then after I've eaten them, I turn into Joey. I'm like, just anything. If I burp, I think that I'm going to bring up my intestines. It's So yeah, I just really enjoy the adventure, never knowing if it's going to be my last meal.
Jeez.
Have you ever been crook off one?
No, I've been really fortunate. I haven't. No, I've never been really bad. I've been, yeah, yeah. No, I've been really lucky. Never been ill from it.
Is there a rule of thumb? What is the rule of thumb for anyone who has no idea when it comes to mushrooms?
Oh, I mean, there's pale spread out gills. So white spread out gills is almost always going to be something that you can eat. But the problem is that most mushrooms have a sinister counterpart. So, for instance, you've got parasol mushrooms, the big round ones that have got the kind of jaggedness on them. You've got the parasol, which is amazing. It tastes like beef. It's delicious. It's really aromatic. It's amazing. It's got lovely texture. And then you've got the false parasol, and the only way to tell is that the stem has got stretch marks on it of the natural parasol. So it looks like it had a kind of brown, thin skin around it that stretched because it grew too quickly, like a stretch mark. And the false parasol doesn't. And that stands for most mushrooms. You get bollettas, and most of them are great. You get the ink blot ones that, as you cut them, they get that real vibrant blue that comes through, and they're delicious. But then ones with a slight red tinge to them, you're going to spend a lot of time squatting in the bush after one of those. It really is just really knowing your mushrooms.
Yeah. There's something I'd like to get into more of actually is a bit of foraging. I love eating mushrooms. I think they're great, especially with steak and things. But it's just knowledge. That's all it is. It's like I've been out a couple of times with the missus, and we'll find heaps, pick heaps, and then we look at it and we're like, oh, is it safe? No, no. And then you end up with like 2, and you're like, it's not really worth it.
Throw them as well.
Yeah, I'm really into it, and I think one of my biggest fears is dying of starvation surrounded by food.
Yeah.
Like there's this thing that frogs they eat based on movement. So a lot of frogs, you could put them in a container full of mealworms that are dead, and they'll die of starvation because they'll only eat ones that move.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, God, what a stupid idiot, surrounded by food. But then, I mean, if you don't know what the plants are, you could quite easily die in the bush and there'd be food everywhere. Or even, being able to catch animals. People always argue with me saying that I don't agree with hunting unless you're in a survival situation. And my argument is always, you'd never be able to catch anything unless you've practiced it.
Yeah.
So unless you're an active hunter, you're never going to be a hunter who lives in a survival situation.
I think most people aren't going to survive.
Yeah, I think we're way too far separated from nature as a whole.
Yeah.
So there's not many that actually know.
People miss that
to
point
survive.
of hunting. Not only is it, you're going out and hunting, but it's that connection with nature. I think people overlook that way too much. They just look at the bad sort of, stigma behind it, and they don't realise that you're out there, connecting with nature.
Well, Calem, I'd actually like to know how you got into hunting, because you did mention to us that you actually started out as an anti-hunter. So how did getting into hunting actually come around for you?
Well, it's a funny story, actually. It's a story of the owl and the pussycat. So it started off in my mind, really. So I had an uncle who introduced me to exotic pets. Is really why I got into it. Like, his was mainly exotic fish and birds. So he kept quails, and he had a few other things in a big aviary. And he had koi carp, and he had Siamese fighting fish. And I was in awe of his house whenever we'd go there. Lived in Plymouth. And one day, the cat was dying. And he took the cat and he took it into the shed, and I never heard another thing about the cat. And then I found out when we got home that he'd taken a shovel and cut the cat's head off. And I thought he was a monster. It really did taint my opinion of my uncle. I thought, how could he do it? He's supposed to be an animal lover. How could he kill it? That's insane, And then fast forward a few years, and I had a pet barn owl that was, I suppose I can talk about it now, it's not too bad. He was actually bred by someone who didn't have a license, so it was like an illegal barn owl, but I was a kid. And anyway, one day I went to check on it, and he had gotten caught on his aviary, on his thing, and he'd broken his neck. And I was distraught, and I put him in a box, and I went down to the guy that I got it from, and this guy's like, oh yeah, well, we all knew what the situation was. He wasn't going to make it, and he said, "Oh no, I couldn't do it. I don't have the heart." And as I was walking home and I was crying, I was like a kid, and all cut up about my owl, and it died. Like the kicking stopped, and I realized, because I think all people who don't hunt think that it's a virtue. They say that I'm an animal lover, I could never hurt an animal. But in that instance, I wasn't doing what was best for the animal. I was doing what was best for my feelings.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't bring myself to put that animal out of misery. And I just started to think that it was, I just had to rejiggle my actions to fit my ethos rather than catering my life around my emotions, which is what people do, is they justify what they think is a virtue, which I think is actually a weakness of character, and they jiggle it around to justify their feelings. And I just had to go the other way. So I told myself, I wanted to start being able to hunt my own food. If I'm going to eat meat, I want to be able to be the dude who kills it. So I gave myself, it took me 4 years. I was going to take a couple of years, but it took me like 4 years of watching dispatch videos, getting really proficient. I started shooting clay pigeons competitively, semi-competitively, got really into rifle hunting, really into like learning, because there's so much, actually making an ethical shot. There's so much to it. Am I on a hill? What's the animal doing? Being able to read an animal, practicing my stalking, going to local estates that had deer and just following the animal. I came to realize that I wasn't anti-hunting, and I don't think, if you actually look at it, that many people are anti-hunting, because they're not anti the actions of animals who don't care. There is no humane dispatch in the animal world, really, unless you're a solitary hunter like a big cat, apart from lions, that hunt things that are almost an equal size and weight, because you have to kill them instantly because they'll end up killing you. Every single other animal that eats meat will just eat it while it's alive, but they don't care. But no one deplores the actions of those animals. And then, so that's where you start. So you don't hate hunting in that regard. And then if you say, well, what about a Maasai warrior who goes out and kills a lion as a rites of passage? They go out and they hunt lions as a matter of routine, not even necessarily if the lion's a threat. Do you have a problem with them being hunters? And they'll always say no. So what the people's problem really is a prejudice against this very particular type of person, and that is people who live like them but choose to hunt. People who are from the West, because they presume that they've got some nefarious reasons for wanting to do it, that they actually enjoy hurting animals.
Yeah.
Which is so mental. That someone, because if you weren't into that, you'd spend a lot of time and you spend a lot less money going to a pet shop and being nasty that way, rather than going out and sometimes using a minimal kit like bows and arrows to try your best to dispatch an animal. And if anything goes wrong, you beat yourself up about it. I mean, I'd even argue that people who hunt love animals way more than non-hunters, because non-hunters don't know any animals. They've never had any interactions with animals. Having a cat or a dog is not an animal. That is like it's just like a science project. I've heard it referred to in the past. There's nothing like an animal. You don't understand what animals are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you do spend a lot of time as a hunter investing a lot of time and effort researching into the species you're after. So the things you learn about deer, and especially observing them in their natural habitat. Well, in Australia, it's not exactly a natural habitat, but it is kind of now. But it's amazing watching animals in the wild, and you've sort of insert yourself in the food chain and just sit there and watch nature go around. It's a very different perspective to what most people see when they go for a bushwalk, because they're making a lot of noise and the animals are scared off. But when an animal doesn't know you're there and you can observe them, there's so much knowledge to be gained in doing that, and it's kind of a beautiful thing. And it gives you more of an appreciation for the species you're after, I think.
I agree with you 100%. I think that people have a misconception that when they go into the woods, they're like Snow White or Mary Poppins and the birds are all flying around and chirping for them, when the reality is that everything's run away and there are a few species that remain, and they're sending out alarm calls to tell you that they see you, they're not afraid, and that they're trying to put you off of your hunt. You are an apex predator. You have been for millions of years, and it's nice to know truly where you fit and appreciate nature from an honest perspective. rather than a Disneyfied view of the world. It's a different world. It really is.
I think, the Disneyfied thing. As soon as anyone who's, not, who sort of has that stigma still and they're not familiar with hunting, they go, oh, you shoot Bambi. That's always the first thing people say.
Yeah. And also, the thing they don't understand is that the guy who shot Bambi wasn't a hunter. He was a poacher. It was out of season. And he was physically chasing down a doe with a fawn. If anybody went on to a hunting forum and spoke to hunters and told them that they were doing that, they'd get as much strife as if they went on to a vegan forum and tried to do it. No hunters are into that. It's not true.
Exactly.
We're not out looking for Bambi's mum.
Very true. Very true. All right. The next question is, what is your most treasured possession, Calem?
What's my most treasured possession? I try not to be too into possessions like that. I don't like to, because everything's kind of disposable. I don't like to put too much onus on trinkets. What would be my most treasured possession?
What about sentimental value? I mean, if you're not materialistic, there's got to be maybe something with some sentimental value or a piece of kit that's your favourite.
I do have one knife that is at the point. I like tools to be tools, and it annoys me. Like my first shotgun was Browning Maxus. It was a semi-automatic with carbon fiber, and it was beautiful. Cost me a few grand. It was a present actually, and the problem is that I love doing rough shooting. I love being in the blind. I love shooting birds, and I'd spend more time concerned about damaging my gun than I would be about getting my quarry. And I'd much rather have like my over and under middle and arms. It was an old Rattler, but it shot straight, and I was concentrating on what I was doing. So I really do hate it when I have that opinion of things. But I've got a knife, and it was given to Kai, and Kai gave it to me. And it's a folder, and I think the reason why it's so sentimental is the fact that I've managed to hold on to it for so long. I've had it for all this time, scraping through the bush, and it's a Southern Grind. So It's a company from the States, which is owned by Zach Brown, and the singer, and he gave it to Kai, and Kai let me have it. And I'm just now with every year that passes that I've got it, the fear of losing it is so much greater. And it's seen everything. I've like cut up so many animals with it. I've done so much stuff with it.
Is that your everyday carry?
It is definitely my EDC. And I keep thinking about replacing it, but then as much as I'm scared of losing it with every year that passes, I do want to see how many years I can get out of it before I end up losing it.
Very nice. Well, we 100% agree with you in terms of the firearms thing and just treating them as a tool, because, I mean, when you get in your rifle, you're a bit careful with it, but then the amount of knocks and scrapes and things that they get if you're using them properly and using them for what they're designed for, if you're being precious about it, it's just a painful experience in going hunting. So agree with you. Couldn't agree with you more there.
For sure. And those dings and scrapes are badges of honor as well. You look down, and I lament the scars on the stock, but then I'm like, oh, that scar was where I went over that piece of barbed wire, and I went and did that retrieval and managed to find that bird that that pheasant that went down in the other field. And there's a bit, it brings life to your tools when you get them into dings and scrapes.
What's your favorite way of sort of hunting? I've seen you sort of do a lot of bow hunting, and there's a few rifles on there as well. What's your sort of go-to?
My go-to? Well, I definitely would consider myself a bow hunter predominantly. I love rifle hunting. I love shotguns. I mean, shotguns was my biggest passion when I was in the UK. I do love those forms of hunting, and I don't want to sound elitist, and I know a lot of bow hunters are, but I kind of got to the feeling that it's more of a true hunting experience. When you get to 200 yards and the rifle hunter's hunt is almost over, it's where your bow hunter's hunt really begins. It just makes that fair chase more fair, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I definitely do. I have been getting into using, and so it's the closer you get. You start off with a rifle out in the distance, and then you get closer and closer until some people, I mean, they'll sit in a tree and use a knife and fall down on things. That's crazy. But using a spear, a traditional spear and warmer, I've had a go. I'm not a bad shot, but I did experience. So we were out, and I was with a load of boys in Wadair, and we were out spear hunting, making them all traditionally. And there was one kid, he was a little bit dumpy. He wasn't the prettiest kid in the world, but could he throw a spear? The waves were rolling in. We had like 1 foot waves that were really clean and crisp in total clear water, and you'd get a glimpse of a mullet, which was 0.1 second, just a shimmer of a mullet, swimming through the waves that rolls in, and he was hitting them in the head. And it just sparked off this competition. All the other boys that had used spears and stuff, but it turned out that this guy would go out with his grandfather, and they would go to the beach, and it was like, right, we need to eat. He would just take him out and teach him the old way, and he was elite. And all the other kids, they were doing everything they can. I'm going to make a spear with 15 barbs, and I'm going to make another one with just 1 big barb, and it was crazy. But yeah, one day he fed the whole camp, just him. There was a stingray, there was black bream. He was just slaying it. Just pulling in all these fish.
What sort of distance are they spearing them at?
Oh, like bow range, really. 15-20 with a warmer. You can get a bit more distance out of it. Like the traditional methods for land was quite often during the burn-offs, unless you're doing spot and stalk traditionally, during the burn-offs, you'd have things fleeing and they'd hit them on the wing, and you can get some serious distance. Being accurate is another thing, but when you've been practicing from birth, it's second nature. But yeah, you'd be amazed at how just adding a warmer rod to the equation, you can get some good range out of it.
Do you have to change the sort of technique in the way that you throw the spear with a warmer?
Yeah, so I mean, you're aiming forward and you're dragging down and creating that bit of a flick. It's hard to explain, and it differs from person to person a little bit, I suppose, but mainly you're just trying to keep it straight. You don't want to go off to the side because it causes a lot of problems. But it does, it changes your technique a little bit. But it's just getting the feel for it. I mean, everything, when you first grab it, you give it a little twitch because, I mean, you're still looking at Archer's paradox when you're throwing a spear. The back of the spear is moving, so you've got to think about the spine. The spine weight of it is a factor, and just giving it a little flex and doing it is, there's definitely an art form to it.
That's something I would be keen to try, to be honest. That'd be exciting.
Something different.
Yeah.
Going on spears, I see you make your own spearheads.
Yeah. You do a that thing, yeah.
How do you find doing that?
I actually, not to flex, but I did pick it up really quickly. The guy who taught me spent years doing it, and I did have the good fortune of having all the materials to hand, and a guy called Ryan Gill, who is very prolific. I mean, he's got a company that makes them and you can buy them off him, and he's really good. He goes out hunting bison and deer just with an atlatl, I mean the American version, but it's a spear and warmer. He's pretty good, and he is a spectacular napper, and he did a 2-hour video of how to nap flint. There's the beginners and slightly intermediate, and I just drilled it. I had the time off and I had the ability to do it, and I picked it up pretty quickly. But it's just a whole skill in itself. And I do a lot of bladesmithing. I make my own knives, and it's not really comparable as to which is easier and harder because it's a totally different discipline, but it's crazy hard getting to just reading the stone, like they say that every single stone has an arrowhead in it.
Yeah.
And if you can find it, it's that if you'd find it or not, it's your fault. It's up to you. It's in there. It's just being able to read it, because the amount of times you'll spend hours chipping away at it, and then all of a sudden you tap the wrong bit, it splits in two, and it's ruined.
Yeah, it'll be frustrating.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, there must be a bit of an art to it. I've watched a few people do it online, and there's a guy who does it. I can't remember the name of him, but he just literally sits it on his lap and just goes to town on this thing, and it just looks easy, but I'm sure it isn't. I'm sure there's an art form to it, definitely. It
really is. I mean, it's almost like layers of paper, and you've got to hit the platform to get, so the Hertzian cone, which the energy travels through in a cone shape. So you've got to hit it on just the angle that it takes off a sheet, a tiny sliver of that stone. And it looks really easy because he's looking at it instantly and he's reading the stone. He knows to hit that platform. And then, but it is like a puzzle. It's like doing a puzzle. That's what I enjoy about it, is every time you hit it, you create a new, it's like playing chess. You move a piece and it changes the board. and then you've got to reread it, and then you can win or lose the game depending on how you play. But I mean, some people, what would be amazing is getting to the level where you've got a chunk of stone, piece of flint or obsidian in your pocket, a few pieces of antler, and you just go out in the bush and you just go tap, 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 tap. Every single throw, you pretty much are going to break the head. But being able to produce everything just like that, like I was looking into people who were the original traders. So the Aboriginal people, as they traded around the country, one person would go to the next community, and just having the knowledge and the ability to take a piece of rock, a couple of sticks, and you'd have a piece of ochre wrapped up in your hair, and you're just going to walk into the bush for days, and just having that ability is what I aspire to. To be able to go and do that would be spectacular.
You got a favourite material to make the arrowheads with?
Oh, a nice piece of heat-treated chert for how it comes out. But the actual process, I mean, I really like working obsidian. Volcanic glass, it just is a bit more forgiving during the working. The raw chert that's not been heat-treated, it lasts a bit better, is a bit more robust, but trying to get into it, I mean, it takes a lot of muscle, a lot of go to get through it. And then you get quite aggressive and you're into it, and then you end up breaking it. So I've done a lot of that.
How hard is it to find obsidian? Because I don't think I've ever come across it, to be honest.
Oh, it doesn't exist in Australia. You only fully find.
There we go.
So I get it imported in. That's the only place you really find really good flint, and I say really good, is like slightly subpar, is on the SA coast, and you're not allowed to take it because it's a natural thing that you're not supposed to mess with. So obviously I wouldn't take any of that, but if you were to go and get some, that would be where you go and get it from.
So a stone head, arrowhead, how hard's that to make?
Yeah, it's pretty hard. I mean, to be honest, it's as hard or as easy as you make it. You can just smack a piece of rock against another rock, and if it's a fine-grained rock, you'll end up with an arrowhead. Interestingly, the Aboriginal people, their technique wasn't like the Native Americans' technique. The Native Americans would biface, so they would remove stone on platforms and they'd work a piece so there was a biface, like a bevel on each side.
Yep.
Whereas the Aboriginals would find a rock with an edge like that, it's hard to explain, and then they would hit that platform and the head would come off in one piece. So it would be like a triangle shape and almost like a sushi knife that's got an edge and then a flat piece.
Yep. Makes sense. Yep.
And they would prefer that technique because when you've got that down, you can have a core sample and then just knock off pieces, and it's as easy as that, really. If you need a little knife to skin, you just take your core piece and you smack off a sliver in the perfect spot, and you've got a little skinning knife, and once you're done, you chuck it away. You need a bigger piece because you're going to make a spear and warmer. You just smack off a lot larger piece just in the right spot, and then you've got that, and you just fix it with some gum resin, some grass tree resin or a little bit of milk, and you're away.
There you go.
Sweet.
There's a lot to learn.
It almost seems like our materials native to Australia aren't overly conducive for survival compared to somewhere like the States.
Got to make the most of what you got, though.
You do, but it almost sounds like it's just that slightly bit more difficult in Australia.
But is that just because you hear a lot of American survival situations where you don't really sort of hear a whole lot of Australian survival situations, and it's what you know?
Well, the material seems more bountiful up there. I don't know.
I think it definitely depends on where you are. I mean, Australia is so diverse. If I was to have to survive somewhere, I'd rather be up in the north, up in the tropics of Queensland, up in the tropical north generally, because, I mean, for instance, there are some food sources that they have in the north and in the south that they don't even know about in the north because they don't bother, because they don't need to. Like they don't know, or they've forgotten that it's a food source because they just wouldn't bother. There's so many other great things. There's a lot of fast growing plants that are medicinal and they bear fruit, and it's just a much more conducive environment. The people who are really, really the most hardcore survivalists are the ones that made it in Alice, made it in the center of the country in those deserts.
Just surviving the flies.
I think the sun would get me first.
5 minutes with flies, man. I'll be like, get away.
Yeah, I'd burn to a crisp.
It's just food flying around your head.
Oh, yeah.
It is for sure, yeah. It's all protein.
Oh, no pass. But you can't say you've never eaten one. It's not been intentional, but
Well, in the army, when they'd land in your food, you'd be like, whatever. But if it happened in a restaurant, I'd be like, no, this is terrible. Take it back.
they're probably your best flies to eat. They've been living well.
Yeah. A little cleaner.
I had my hopes and dreams shattered the other day because apparently that myth, apparently I found out it's a myth now that it's quite common that people say you eat 15 spiders a year in your sleep because your mouth's open. But it's become so widespread that it's just been accepted now.
Yeah.
But it's actually a myth.
It's actually 20.
20.
Yeah.
I just wonder, how would you do that experiment? How would you be able to come up with that statistic? You'd have to have a cross-section of people, say 100 people, and you'd have to have a camera on their mouth every night for at least a year to find out. I just think someone just made that up, didn't they?
Yeah.
It just went out.
Yeah, everyone sort of just accepted it. Now it's become, just, okay, yep, cool.
I think it was good to tell your mate that was shit scared of spiders.
100%.
Oh, dear. All right, well, let's flip this on its head a bit. Calem, what's your favourite movie?
Oh, I'm a little bit basic when it comes to that question. I've not got something exotic. It was always Pulp Fiction by Quentin Tarantino. That was always my favorite film. When anyone asked me, that was my favorite film. And then I had to really be honest. And for my joy of watching it and how much I enjoyed it, it's Kill Bill, which is another Tarantino film.
Yeah,
I really love that film because I used to be into the old samurai movies, and you can call it plagiarism, but I think it's a homage that he plays to those kind of films in all the little Easter eggs and the little knowledge about it. Brought David Carradine's career back to life for the same way he brought Travolta's career back to life in Pulp Fiction. Exactly. He's definitely my favorite director, but it's kind of a toss-up between those two films, I suppose.
I rewatched Pulp Fiction not that long ago, and I'm like, what was I doing watching this when I was a lad?
For sure. Yeah.
it's pretty out there, isn't it?
It is, to be honest. It is. Anyway.
All right, we'll move on. Next one is recommend a guest to be on this podcast, Calem.
Well, I think you should probably get Kai on there at some point. That would be a good guest to have.
We would love that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
Mate, you don't have to go any further. We'd happily have Kai on.
Maybe we should set it up.
Sure.
I watched Blind Spot, talking about Kai, I watched Blind Spot like many, many years ago. And obviously, since following yourself and your missus, realising that she was a stunt double, the main actor's stunt double, I'm like, oh my God, it just made the series better for me, actually. I was like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, well, she was Jamie Alexander's stunt double for Thor. Did Thor with her and, carried on and did the first season of Blind Spot as well.
With Blind Spot, did she have to get all the tattoos done?
They just had I think it was transfers. They just put them on in the morning and, you can wash them off in the evening.
Geez, that would have taken a while.
I'm not sure if I've seen Blind Spot or not.
I don't think so.
That's not the one where she wakes up in a bag in the street. Oh, yes, I have. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, very good.
I've actually never watched.
Well, all the tattoos, mean something, and
whether it's about her or it's a clue
something.
about something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually really good. Watch it, Caleb. You like it?
Well, I'll better before we have Kai on the podcast.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the last question of our formatted ones, Calem, is what was your first rifle?
It was a 22, and it in the UK. So in Australia, I think it's crazy that you have to have a license for pellet guns, but in the UK, if we're talking about any rifles, and I suppose air rifles are in there, that counts. I mean, you get some big bore ones that are pretty heavy. So in the UK, anyone can get one. And I think you have to be 18 now, but when I was a kid, anyone with 50 quid can go and get yourself a rifle. So I had a Virac Springer S99 or P99, I think it was called. And it was a German bomb-proof gun, it was. And it was my first introduction into rifle shooting and being able to, learn your putting your pins up and down and learn your ranges. It was a beautiful experience, just romping around the woods with that. It's great.
I bet. That's kind of the progression I think a lot of people go on is, air rifle to 22 to, a centerfire after that or a shotgun. So it's pretty common, I reckon.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the UK as well, there's a lot of people who've had questionable backgrounds. And I think one thing that's lovely about it, which is kind of similar to bow hunting in Australia, is no matter what you've done that might be slightly questionable in the eyes of the law, you can still have an efficient means of being able to go out and get your own food.
Mm.
And there is no bow hunting in the UK, obviously. But when it comes to air rifle hunting, it's perceived as like a kid's toy, isn't it, really? Not a toy, but, you're like an intro into hunting. But there are a lot of adults that take it really seriously. And they've got really great high-powered PCPs, and going out and doing vermin control and hunting for small game is their lives. They're really passionate about it.
Yeah. Is it a little bit bigger, the whole air rifle sort of hunting, because of the land sizes? Are smaller. Like, I'm presuming they don't have 38,000 hectare plots. Of farmland. Sure. Like it's 20 acres or 40 acres or whatever.
Yeah, because for that reason, and also getting land which is signed off to use firearm is a whole different ballgame. It's not just a case of, oh, my friend's got some land and it's private land and I've got a gun. It needs to be signed off by a firearms officer to be land that you can use to shoot on, and you've got to be like a certain distance, which is quite a far distance away from any public buildings or public roads. It's a different kettle of fish. But when you've got an air rifle, you can you just have to be 50 meters away from the road, I think.
Huh. Mm. With that signing off the land, is that signed off for the shooter to be able to shoot on the land, or is that signed off on the landowner for shooters able to shoot on, kind of thing?
Yeah, it's signed off by the government that the land's okay to be shot on.
Okay, so that's more the property owner sort of side of things, and a multiple shooter wouldn't have to get the same paperwork?
No. So it's not, as soon as the land's signed off, and because the whole legality of getting a gun is crazy. I mean, I've got no criminal record whatsoever. I was working when I went for my license, I was working at a shoot. I was the poster boy for someone who should have a gun, and they still made you jump through so many hoops, and it's a really big deal. So just getting, and if you want something else, if you want suppressors, if you want extended mags, extended anything, it's a real hullabaloo. They want to ask lots of questions and go through everything. And to get your firearm certificate, you need to have land that's been signed off by a firearms officer that you're going to shoot on, and everyone's saying that you're going to do it. So it's part of that as well, that you need to have it all boxed off.
Sounds next level, which is kind of why, something we're very passionate about is the firearms laws here and fighting some of the ones that are ridiculous. So, far out.
We have it okay at the moment, but if we don't stand united and have a voice, it'll be eroded real quick, definitely.
Yeah,
in Australia, unfortunately. But talking about a first firearm, what about your first bow? Are you a trad bow man, recurve, compound?
Well, I've gone to trad. When I first started shooting archery, it was traditional. I wanted to be Robin Hood when I was a kid. I started off making them when I was really small and stepped up and then got myself a proper recurve. And it was one of those ones, kind of the ones you use in school, because a big clubby one. It was a takedown. And then when it came to hunting, I then got into the kind of compound bow, John Deadly, to Joe Rogan, going out and looked at those people and their hunting experiences. I was really concerned with being proficient. I really wanted to be able to harvest cleanly from further away if necessary. And I got into compound shooting. And because they wouldn't let me have a compound, I was like, oh, Christ, I need to get myself a recurve and get back into it. And then I got back and I got myself a one-piece and started shooting recurve, and then really started looking into it, got really obsessed with form and everything like that. I wanted to get as proficient as I could in a short period of time. But now I'm just getting this compound itch again. I'm loving shooting trad, but I went to the archery shop. I went to Archery Supplies in Adelaide the other day and went past a nice PSE, and I was like, "Oh, it's like, how you doing?" You know?
That's a familiar feeling.
Yeah, I think
I need to bite the bullet on that and just buy one.
we'll definitely get into bow hunting a bit more, and obviously compound's probably the start, but trad interests me a lot, especially to like bow fish. Like I think it would be awesome fun. But none of us have done a whole heap of bow hunting, to be honest.
Yeah, I think just the sense of accomplishment when you go bow hunting. Also, the sense of defeat. I mean, there's a reason why they call it the struggle stick, because knowing full well that at first when you start bow hunting and knowing full well you would have harvested that animal if you had a gun, that's frustrating. But when you manage to creep in and you've picked the wind perfectly and you've picked your positioning and your stalk's perfect and you get in there and then you miss, or there's something about it you like. What I get quite often is if I don't feel like my draw cycle is perfect, then I'll let down, and in that moment you've only usually got a window of seconds before because a lot of people, I think, they don't have a lot of successes in bow hunting because they just follow animals around. The animal's moving into the wind, you're behind the animal, and you're never going to get yourself in a position. So choosing when to break off and use cover and try and bank around it while you're in a quartering wind and get around. I mean, it's a serious art form, and it's a really time sensitive, and not having your shit together is the worst thing. And being a trad bow hunter is just so much going on.
With the trad, when you're shooting the bow, are you trying to draw and release as quick as possible? And is that just because of the pounds that you're holding back?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of argument with that. I mean, personally, I just have a cycle that I like to go through, and I find there's a sweet spot because I don't know how people do hold it and be able to aim and fix on the spot. I'm a bit of a floater, like I kind of figure of 8 float, and then I pick my moment. But as long as I do everything, like I like to pre-aim, aim, first anchor, focus on my spot, come to my second anchor, release, and just getting that sweet release and everything going smoothly in practice is hard enough. But everything going smoothly when you're watching an animal and you've only got a short period of time, it's a lot. It's really cool. It's a really cool experience for sure.
Well, I think, Calem, you're probably the perfect person to ask. So I don't know if you know, but the Labor government here in South Australia are committed to banning bow hunting in this state for reasons that it's inhumane, and there's been a couple of bad cases in the media where some idiots fired a target tip into a kangaroo or a seal or something stupid, which is again the minority idiots ruining it for everyone else. But what's your take on the unethical sort of argument about putting an animal down? Because obviously you're quite passionate about doing it ethically.
I couldn't disagree more. I mean, there is an element, you've got to be realistic, there is an element of the animal, things not going as you would like them to go. Mm-hmm. But what we have to do is look at things in the reality of the world, and that is a byproduct of hunting. That's a byproduct of being alive. And we put human parameters on animals. The animal is almost certainly going to die of a few things, and none of it is in bed next to their little fawns that are all watching them go peacefully in their sleep. They're going to die of predation, pestilence, or some freak accident, which is going to be distressing and painful, and is going to be the end of their life. I'd argue that the dispatch, even an inhumane one, is not as terrible as what their outcome would be. But that's not our job. Is to be as humane as possible. And with a solid shot from a bow, I would argue, and I'd like to do some tests on cortisol plasma in the blood, which analyzes stress levels. I think that a good shot from a bow hunter is the most ethical kill you can get, because with a gun, they've done some tests and found that compared to a deer that's killed at an abattoir, their stress levels are like 10% of what they are when they're dispatched, and there's all the stuff that's surrounding it. But with a bow, there's no sound. Quite often you'll find that I've heard people say that when you first kill an animal with a bow, you'll get it on the second shot. Quite often people totally miss their first shot. But the animal, the amount of times that I've taken a shot and it's been off and I've missed and then the animal's just like has no idea what's going on. No idea. You get ample opportunity for a second shot. If you get that first shot, they don't even feel it. Their instinct to flight, their flight instinct kicks in, and they're running, and their blood's pumping out, and they're dead before they even know what's happened. There's no stress, and it's the same response they'd have if a leaf hit the floor in a loud manner next to them. You know, they're triggered to run, and they don't understand they're hit. They get a bit woozy, they go unconscious, they bleed out in no time. I think it's the best way in so many ways. You know, shooting from helicopters is very efficient and it's a great way of clearing animals out of areas that are detrimental. But shooting something from a helicopter is arguably much, much worse than someone doing it with the bow.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
That's a really good description of it, actually. Yeah, we're fighting it. There's plenty of groups they're fighting it, but I really don't want to see it get up because it's just another thing we're allowed to do currently that's getting eroded, another liberty that's taken away. And I actually had a really good conversation with one of our listeners who brought to light the fact that, without getting tinfoil hat about it, he was like, well, the government actually doesn't want you to be able to provide for yourself. So these skills of being able to go out and hunt for your own meat, the government would rather you just, suckle on the teat of what they can provide and be reliant on that rather than possess the skills to do it for yourself. What's your take on that? Because you're very passionate about being able to provide food for yourself.
Yeah, I need to understand that I don't know how far it goes, and I definitely don't believe there is some ruling shadow government in a really organized form that people believe. I just don't think is that. It's more of an organic oligarchy that runs the world, but it does. And in a lot of cases, people can't even store rainwater. They don't want you storing rainwater. Anyone who tries to live off grid, if you create your own power supply and you're not reliant on the government at all, it was happening in England. They'll find a way of, you manage to grow crops and sell those crops enough that you can pay the land baron, the government, for your council tax, and you get by and you manage to hunt and forage and you're off grid, and they find a way of cutting you back down. They want you reliant on the system. So they've got no desire for you to be independent in a similar way that an overbearing parent doesn't want their child going off into the world and doing whatever they want to do. It's like with the gun laws, they're always taken away and they're very rarely given back. In fact, the only time I've ever heard of gun laws being given back is just at the moment. They've given them back in Brazil. People are allowed to have guns again. They've got a new Republic right wing, I suppose you'd call him, guy who's cleaning up the streets, and he's giving back the gun laws. I've never heard of it happening before. But whenever it's taken away, it's always taken away. Usually it's tyranny, but it's never the good of the people is never taken into consideration. I don't think. It's always for the best, for the best of everybody. It's supposed to be. It's the way that it's put forward, but I'm not buying it because there's never any due cause, I don't think.
Fair comment, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Jeez. Who knows?
I don't want to start down that
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole.
It is an absolute rabbit hole for sure. Well, maybe we switch back to rifles then. Do you have a favourite at the moment that you sort of go to, caliber or type of rifle?
I currently, so I've been using a Steyr Manalika, which is 223, does everything. It's just I can chuck it anywhere. I can throw it off a cliff, and I know that those sights are going to be level. It's just composite stock, does its job. It's beautiful. Want to go out? I'd like to do some more deer stuff, so I'm looking at getting a 308, something with a bit more of a classic look about it. I like a wooden stock. I like that kind of ye olde leather strap over your shoulder style. I know that having a good modern composite stock is going to be the best way to go for the life of the gun, but it's not always about that.
Yep. How do you go traveling so much with your rifles? Do you always take them with you, or is that something that...
No, I only take we've got a custom back cab on our ute that's got 2 cases. One fits a compound bow perfectly, and the other one fits a recurve or a series of recurve bows perfectly, and they're locked. But the compound one is the exact same size, and I've got some inserts that take broken down shotguns, and the one that takes the recurve bow has also got the inserts that take rifles. So they're just lock cabinets in the back of the ute.
Yeah, sweet.
Custom made. It's pretty cool.
And you'll just take them when you know you're going to an area that you're going to hunt. You wouldn't leave them in the back of your car, sure.
No, 100%. No. Only when I'm going from A to B, and if I'm going somewhere, it's going out deep in the bush, and I'm only person there for
See, I only ask because I'd like to do a little bit of travelling one day around Australia, and obviously hunting, and I'd like to take my firearm with me, but I know obviously some firearms aren't legal in some states where they are in others, and two, if you're just travelling, no one can give you a sound answer on, it's fine to travel with it locked up in the back of your car if you're moving through an area and say you stop in for a week somewhere on your way to hunt. Technically, you're on your way to hunt, but you've just decided to stop in. So, is that legal? Is it not? No one really can give a definitive answer on this, to be honest.
I think as long as it remains on your person and you aren't just doing it casually, it's all situations, alter cases. Mm-hmm. And it's so different. I mean, if you're in the NT, they just whatever, I've just found out that helicopter pilots, because I befriended one, helicopter pilots can concealed carry a pistol. They're one of the only people that are allowed to concealed carry pistols.
Yeah.
What? For what reason?
Yeah. Why?
Just in case
the argument
terrorists?
is because they're in confined space, and if they went down in an area that had a crocodile in it, or they had to put set down in an area with a crocodile in it, they've got something that they can dispatch it with. But I feel like someone who had a lot of money and a helicopter license and wanted a concealed carry permit, and he had the ear of someone in government. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there.
Because otherwise, if you're fishing in a boat in the Northern Territory, then you should be able to conceal carry.
In that very same style of thinking, you should. Yeah. But I know that the croc catchers like Matt Wright and all that, a couple of his lads are allowed they've got a permit to carry a open carry a pistol whilst they work with the croc catching. One of them's got like this big gold Desert Eagle. I don't know why, but hey, it does.
Looks cool.
Why not? 50 caliber, you need it, of course.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't need it, you want it. So.
Right.
No, I don't think I could afford the rounds right now.
That'd be $5 a round.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Calem, we've got to ask: is there a hunting trip in Australia that you're planning or you want to go on? Like, is there a species?
Yeah, well, it's more the form. So I'm getting really into long form hunts with minimal kit. So I'm just getting into taking a live straw and trying to drink naturally. And I've I haven't got a trad bow deer yet, so got to get that on the books. Focusing on fallow, so I've got myself a bleater. I've even gone to the lengths of getting myself a climbing tree stand. I didn't realize that it's quite hard to get up gums with a climber because they can slip because they haven't got the bark. That was before I ordered it from the States, and Bella shipped it in. It cost me loads of money, but yeah, I've got one, so that's on the cards, and I'm really focusing on that. So I'm going to go deep. And, the deeper you go, the less stressed the animals are. I get stories of friends trying to bow hunt on private land during the rut, and they've got bullets whizzing over their head because they're in a ghillie suit in the bush, It's I'm just really focusing on those kind of hunts. I've got a couple planned. Going to go out in Vic. Obviously, it's a great place because you get to still hunt private land. Public land. Yep. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I did try my luck. I was up in the NT and I had a permission to go after a buffalo, but didn't get down on that, unfortunately. Didn't manage to get around to that. So that's one I've got to go back up there, and got unfinished business with a buffalo up there.
With your bow.
Yeah. For sure.
Well, I have to ask, you've done a fair bit in Australia, Calem. Have you hunted much internationally? And then the same question again, like, is there a dream hunt internationally?
Yeah, not really done much. I mean, Africa is where it's at, That's my focus. I was considering, Kai was considering doing a Naked and Afraid that was in Africa, and I then was considering doing one as well, because it was going to, just if I could go to Africa, make that the stipulation, so I could then stay on and do a hunt. Somewhere like Botswana, something like that, going for, I mean, the big one would be buffalo, Cape buffalo. Like, that's the ultimate, if you're going to, talking about the dangerous element, the skill element that it takes, kill most people, second most people, the animal that kills the second most people in the bush up there.
Yep.
But something like Gamesbok or kudu. Kudu's always been a big one on the list for me. But just generally doing that kind of threadbare experience and going out there and hunting Africa would be amazing.
I reckon.
Yeah, it would.
We've had a few guests on that have said the Cape Buff is just the pinnacle for them of hunting experience. And like you said, the danger element, the difficulty, just, yeah. So, I mean, I'd love to give it a go, but I think it's a bit down the track for my progression.
It's pretty pricey.
Can't be too far down the track though. You'll start getting slower.
You mentioned that you've got some ties between you and your partner in the States. Was there anything in the States that you'd chase?
Oh, 100%. I mean, well, I've always really wanted to try blueberry black bears. Since I found out that the early settlers would shoot the bucks for their skins and they'd go after bear for their meat. Also, it's got that danger element to it too. But those ones that eat the blueberries, apparently, they're just the best. So getting up there and getting out into the Yukon, like that's one of my biggest dreams is pack horse hunting. Been touching up on my riding skills. I've got myself some really cool Nashville cowboy boots that Clive got me for my birthday. And getting up there and getting on some horses and going out into the Yukon. I mean, Canada more so.
Yep.
Just because of the remoteness, as we were saying about unpressured, and in that case, never seen a human before. Being in a real environment where you're super remote and working symbiotically with animals. I've always loved hunting with animals. Like used to keep ferrets and hunt with them, and I had a lurcher I used to run rabbits and stuff with. It was great. So being out there just with relying on the horse to get you by, and that would be amazing.
Because obviously we've gone and talked a lot about hunting, and you seem to sort of tend to more of a traditional style. What about fishing?
Yeah, fly fishing was one of my big loves, actually making the flies yourself. I was never great, but you can get pheasant tail nymph knocked up if I've got the stuff. And just going out in that kind of more hunting style of fishing. Because in the UK, there's a lot of coarse fishing, and I spent a lot of time when I was a kid in a bivvy, in a little open-fronted bivvy, sat there freezing my arse off, hoping that something was going to bite, and just... yeah, it's not really my style, with a pole rod, trying to pull it in and take it apart as you try to grab a little perch off the end. It's not my style. Yeah. So getting into waders, getting into the water, seeing a bit of shadow in the corner that there's going to be a trout in, it's an enjoyable experience even if you don't catch. That's one thing I love about getting out there, going bow hunting. Some of the best hunts, you come in with nothing. It's just the experience.
Yeah, 100%.
Did you try any fishing for barra with lures in the NT? I mean, that's a bit more of an active hunting style of fishing.
Yeah, sure, loads. Yeah, I've done quite a bit of barra hunting with lures. Had some success, nothing too crazy. A couple of little ones. It was not this time of year for it, so I wasn't getting much. But when I went up there before, we'd do a little bit of fishing did some spear fishing. I never got a barra, but I've tried some spear fishing for barra. It's getting that refraction right, that's where I'm not quite in it yet, where you don't aim for it, you just aim slightly down to catch the water properly.
Yeah.
But that's big barra with a spear and warmer. That would be definitely my dream, for sure.
Yeah. That would be quite a chase, to be honest.
I was trying to think about the way of if you're in a survival situation and making your own sort of fishing tool, but a spear would just cover that, I feel.
Yeah, I made a really cool one, and I actually used a barra that I caught. I used the barra barb. I attached it with some milk to use that as the barb to catch a fish. I thought there's no greater insult than catching a barra with the barb of another barra.
Yeah. That'd work pretty well.
Like murdering someone with a human bone.
Irony. Yeah.
Wow.
I've seen guys catch barra using a spoon head. They've just put some trebles on a spoon pretty much and just thrown it in the water and boom. Yeah. It's ridiculous. I'll go for anything, those things.
Yeah.
What
Serious predators.
what colour lures were you using when you were in Darwin?
White ones, some of the pink, green, like multicolored ones. I find white works quite well. It just seems to like them, but it's just one of those things. I think if they're feeding, if they're in the mood for it, like you say, if you've got a spoon, you could have a bubblegum wrapper, and just catching that glimpse of light, they're all over it. It just really depends.
Was that a double gum wrapper?
Bubblegum.
Bubble gum. Double gum.
Double bubble.
Chewing gum. I love that video. The bloke catching, I think it was bass with a rat lure, and he was chucking it up a drain pipe, and he was catching bass.
A rat's lure.
A rat. It was literally a rat. It looked like a rat.
Yeah.
That was his lure. He was just chucking up a drain pipe and was catching bass with it.
I've seen videos of guys using a bottle, like a can tab, and that just, I guess, creates glint, and it's enough for the fish to go for
It's
it.
got to be enough to attract him. I'm not going to claim to be an expert by any means, by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly be fun to make your own.
Yeah.
There's something about fishing in the northern states that's just exciting because it's plentiful. Not like down here in South Australia. It's terrible. it's 90% boredom.
I've literally gone out in the evening, and the water's moving because there's so many mullet. In fact, a guy that was up there with me went out, and I couldn't be bothered to go out. I was really tired. I went to bed, and he went out, and literally a mullet jumped on the shore. He was with someone else who corroborated the story, so he wasn't on his own because it sounded like a lie. But a mullet jumped up because it was moving so much. A mullet jumped out, and he put it on his hand line and chucked it out and pulled in the barra just like that. Like free live bait. But the amount of times I've been out and you just look out of the water, you can see big fish jumping, and the water's moving with little fish, and there's crocodile eyes in the corner over there. It's just a different world, fishing up there to fishing down here there's definitely much more. It's much easier for sure.
Yeah.
Josh has been promising to take us up to Darwin for a while, but
Mate,
we
get time off and we'll go, and we'll stop in and we'll pick up. Yeah,
It's probably more our fault we haven't been.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
sounds like a plan. Well, I think we have to say a big thank you to you, Calem, for being on. Any questions for us?
I don't know. What's your sign? No. What kind of hunting do you guys prefer? You don't do much bow hunting. What are you doing?
We usually rifles and for deer. So there's a few private spots here in South Australia that we go, but we do like to get across to Vic and hunt public land. That's I think there's almost a bit more of a thrill of the chase there because there's quite often parcels of land that you don't know. You sort of got to familiarise yourself and put the work in to get to know them and find the sweet spots. So yeah, apart from that, bit of foxes, rabbits.
Tried to touch a little bit of trapping, snares, and we've tried using conifer bear traps and things like that for rabbits.
Yeah.
That was actually pretty exciting. The first time we put the conifer bear trap up, we weren't expecting anything, and we caught a rabbit. So we were like, "Oh yeah, works great."
Wow.
Yeah, so pretty novice at that sort of stuff, other than rifle hunting, I think.
Yeah, like I guess we sort of rifles been our focus. A few years ago, we used to sort of mainly do spotlighting and stuff like that. But then we sort of all got sort of a bit bored of it a little bit, so we sort of moved into deer and tried to focus on that more. And you get a better reward from deer as well.
I think the beauty about hunting is there's quite often a progression that people go on where you start off as a kid, shooting rabbits and whatever, and you might progress to foxes and deer or whatever else. But and you mentioned it, Calem, as well about rifle to compound bow to trad bow to getting up a tree with a knife and jumping out on the things, to blow dart or something like that. It's a progression. So, and everyone's at a different level, which is the beauty of it. You have a chat to a guy and they've been hunting for years in whatever method, and it's a beautiful thing to see where everyone's at and have those discussions. And the main thing is just being out there in nature and enjoying it and being able to provide meat for your family. I think that's what we're most passionate about is ethical hunting and providing for our families as well, that meat. Yeah, I think that's what we're about.
Yeah.
Definitely. What's your take on trophy hunting? What do you feel about that aspect of it?
Meat first. Meat first before trophy, and there's no trophy that any of us have taken that we wouldn't have taken the meat from.
Oh no, you're not going to leave you're not going to just take the rack and walk off with it without the rest.
I think there's a pretty big shift in the hunting community anyway with the whole trophy hunting stigma. I mean, it's done, yes, but all the guys that do it still take the meat, most definitely. Well, maybe not all of them. That's
certainly
quite
most of the ones, well, all the ones we certainly know, but I think it's becoming a bit more widespread than it maybe used to be, where people would just, shoot a trophy animal, lop off its head, and away they go. It's definitely an important thing to utilise the animal as much as you can. So
what's respecting the animal? Really,
I reckon the trophy is just a nice little bonus to, taking that sort of kill. You get the meat from it, and then you get something to sort of, or as you see up here, it's something to remember it by.
Yeah, for sure. I used to always have a stigma surrounding trophy hunting because I thought that was the way that I'd separate myself. People who trophy hunt, they're the people like the great white hunters who just doing it for that, and I am more of a purist, and I'm just in it because I want to feed myself. But the more I'm coming around to the idea of, it's when you're so passionate about something, then adding an element where, the competition element is, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think I'm coming around to it. And unfortunately, I think the world's going the other way, that we're repelled by the concept of it, because like making a sport or as such of hunting. But if you've got, like, for instance, in the States, if you've got a tag and you're going to have a season and you're going to take the risk of potentially wasting the $500,000 you spent on a tag because you want to go for a bigger animal, then more power to you, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's what, I mean, they've got the spoilage fines. If you don't take, it's different from state to state, but if you don't take at least like legs and straps, then you get fined. And I think the way they go about it's great.
They've done that with duck hunting in Victoria, actually. You have to take, utilise, I think, 90% of the duck or something by law now, which I don't think is a bad thing. It just holds hunters a bit more accountable if there's a bit of law around it.
Yeah, well, there's a lot more usable sort of meat and areas on an animal that the general person wouldn't perceive to be edible or usable.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting. We had J. Allen Smith on the podcast, and he's I think got over 300 different species of animals. So, I mean, if you could, I don't know, accuse someone of being a trophy hunter, you could say him. And we asked him about trophy hunting. And you sort of said to him, well, where do you go once you've got something? Like, cool, you've ticked that box, you move on. Like, what keeps driving you? You've got literally every species that people go after. And he's like, well, you get that luxury then. You get something, and then you can choose not to pull the trigger. All the rest of the times you're out there until, okay, there's a bigger one or whatever. You can still go on that progression. And then you can pass on and move to the joy of showing someone else and taking someone else on the hunt. So there's always somewhere to move, even if you get everything.
Does use the meat, though.
Yeah, I mean, he does use the meat. I'm not saying he's a trophy hunter, but I'm saying he's, accused of it or, portrayed badly because he's got so many different species. But I really thought his take on it was pretty cool, in that you don't just get the biggest of something and then hunting's dead for you. There's still a progression you can go on. So it's sort of a never-ending pursuit, really.
It is, but let's face it, food's life, and food is what brings people together. And really, what I'm trying to say is that the eras of trophy hunters, I can't see that very little eras of trophy hunting where they haven't utilised the meat.
Well, if you go on a trophy hunt in Africa, the meat's going to the villages.
Yeah, exactly.
So
how long has that been going for? Probably a lot longer than what we think. We have a really bad culture around food here in Australia. Your food culture is going to a restaurant, where some of the best barbecues and things I've had, we've all gotten together with, a whole heap of other lads that hunt, and you all bring something that you've shot that year. Yeah. And you get together and you cook it up and try different ways, and some people add salt, some people don't, and, make the food taste nice. Sorry, that was a dig at Caleb because he doesn't use salt.
Who doesn't use salt?
Your opinion, he doesn't use enough salt.
I use salt. Josh just uses excessive amounts of salt because he has no taste buds. But that's a whole other digression. I think what people miss out on who don't shoot and prep their own meat is that sense of community. Like it used to be hundreds of years ago, where you get the whole community would come together and that whatever species that had been harvested, you're all doing that food prep and the butchering yourself, and everyone in that community was sharing in that process and reaping the rewards for it. And as hunters, we get that experience still. You get your mates around, you make sausages together, you divvy up the meat, you share it out amongst your friends and family, and it's a really beautiful thing. So
yeah. As you said before, like just getting that sort of harvest sort of becomes a celebration rather than something to look bad upon, I guess.
Yeah, I said on something I said on Hunter Connections podcast the other month was he asked me to explain the feeling I get about hunting, and I put it as it's like our instinct, the same way that like when a gazelle's born, its instinct is to get up on those legs and run. I mean, I'm sure that animal, it's coming from the trauma of just being born, would rather chill out, but something in it tells it innately to run. And that's because through the generations, through its DNA, it's passed on that information. And it doesn't have a knowledge, it's a feeling. It's a feeling that it needs to do that same sort of thing. Same reason as a snake jumps out of an egg and instantly wants to go hunting and so on and so forth. And I said that the feeling I get when I harvest my own food and when I give it to other people and that sense of community, it's the same as like when I look into a fire and I can't stop staring at the fire. There's nothing about it which is particularly alluring, but what it is it's in my DNA. My ancestors made fire, and that fire they used to cook their food or to get warm or to keep predators away. And that feeling locked in their brains, in their DNA, is come through me. Trying to explain how I feel when I go hunting and when I feed people is like trying to explain staring into the fire, which is something we can all relate to. And there is this amazing sense of accomplishment, which, I mean, especially as men, you don't get enough of in this day and age. Those cues, we don't go to war, or definitely not in the same way we used to. We don't have all these typically archetypal, masculine ways of feeling accomplished. But that is one way that you can't deny it. It's like the best way, not just as a man, as a human feeling. Yeah. That sense of primitive accomplishment is spectacular. It makes food taste like that. When you first go hunting, you take a little bit of organ or strap meat, you put it on the fire. It doesn't taste like anything else. It's an individual flavor to itself. The flavor of victory is delicious.
Sure is.
That's well put.
It is.
I'm definitely going to use that comparison with fire and hunting and just
you go for it.
Primal. Yeah,
it's a good one. I think in terms of people who sort of dismiss hunting or say they could never do it, I really respect people who, because I don't believe you can say something's not for you until you've tried it, or at least when it's hunting, gotten right up to the point of pulling the trigger on something. And there's people out there that have got to the point of pulling the trigger and they said they couldn't do it, but at least they got to that point, versus someone who said, hunting's terrible, I couldn't do it, it's not for me. So I think everyone should at least try it. And that's the other thing we're very passionate about, is taking new hunters out and getting more people involved in it. And there's so many people, once they actually try it and realize what it's all about and what goes into it, all the prep work, all the work starts after you've actually, dispatched the animal. That's when the work starts. And they go, wow, there's so much more to it. You're not just some redneck who goes out and, shoots whatever he sees.
Yeah.
So that education process of taking people out and teaching them is something we're definitely passionate about. We don't get to do it enough, but there's not enough hours in the day and free time. But yeah, it's definitely an amazing thing to be able to teach someone else as well.
100%. Yeah, I agree. I love that aspect of getting new hunters involved and explaining to them the realities. Because when anyone wants to get into it, I don't think they understand. Quite often it's perceived that the actual killing of an animal is the objective, when actually it's just a byproduct. It's something that you deal with emotionally and there's a great experience. But all leading up to it is the practice, is the knowing the terrain, is the getting there, is the preparing your kit and being able to accomplish it. And then as soon as that's done, you deal with that for a few seconds, then it's like, oh, now shit, I've got to break it down and all of that gets involved in packing it out and the thereafter, the real hard work. It's such a massive thing, and it's a lovely experience as it unravels for you, and to do that to somebody else is amazing. There's a woman who just recently told me that she just wanted to get into it, and a friend of hers had given her a bow. And I'm like, that's cool, that's amazing. And she realized that I had a wealth of knowledge about it. We got into it, found out that someone had given her a bear, kinetic or something that was like 50 pounds bottom end, you know, it was like 50 to 70 range, and she's like 4'8", and I'm like, I tell you what, I think you might need to get a different bow, you know. So I just like put her on to the archery shop, gave her suggested what bow for her to get, and now she's like mad into it. And I also felt I know another woman who's really into it, and they live close by, and like the community that comes around it as well. It's one of the few things where everyone's so keen to share and learn and teach and brings people together. Like very few hobbies do. There's usually quite an elitist mentality surrounding it. There's usually, you know, a lot of, and there can be a bit of infighting between trad and compounding, whatever, but it's usually just, you know, it's pretty surface level. Underneath, everyone just loves the fact that everyone else is engaged and loving it. It's great.
So how do you go with the antis that you come across?
I don't, it's just because of what I do and who I am. I don't really encounter any of it. I blur into that realm of Maasai hunter, you know, like there's that, because I don't have the persona of the great white hunter. People are really understanding. And I actually think that when you start getting into it, people can't argue with you. But fortunately, I don't engage with a lot of like crazy hardcore vegans. They just don't seem to. And I do really enjoy it. I mean, on the one level, I like people to have a debate with people because I'm constantly trying to test my perspective, and I like people to have an opposing argument. But also because I just know my stance point's really solid. I know that I have gone through this enough to know that I'm going to absolutely ruin them in a debate. So I welcome it, but it just rarely happens. You know? It's not.
It's cold.
Well, I reckon, Calem, we could talk to you for hours, but the hour is getting upon us, so I think it's about time we leave it there. So how can people find you on Instagram and wherever else?
I'm on Instagram, Calem O'Grady. Just my name, Calem O'Grady on Instagram. It's the best place to find me.
Easy. Cool.
Very good. And your mini shows.
And you can, SBS will catch up if you want to watch the show. Is on SBS and Discovery if you're in the States, and it's on NITV. It was on NITV, like I think it just finished airing last week, and it's on Netflix if you fancy popping to the UK.
Beautiful. All right. Well, everyone jump on and check out Calem's work, and also his partner Kai as well. She's a pretty interesting individual as well. So, yeah, we've got to say a big thank you to you, mate, for being on and giving up your time. You've been very generous. So, cheers heaps.
Loved it.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
It's been a great chat.
Ben.
We'll have to catch up one day, have some beers or go out for a trad bow hunt or something.
I love that. Let's do it. For sure.
Sounds good, awesome, mate. You can put us all to shame. Beautiful. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Tune in next week for another episode. And big thanks to Calem for tonight. Cheers, mate. We'll catch you soon.
Cheers, dude. Take it easy.
Will do.
Catch you later, ladies and gentlemen. We're out.
Catch
My brain's not been working the last few weeks.
When has your brain been working?
G'day, dude and dudettes. Josh here. Do you find it hard to keep your long, hard barrels free from gun STDs? Maybe you need a clean out of your bore. If this is you, jump on over to highcaliber.com.au and use the promo code SENDITMATE to receive a 10% discount on all your gun cleaning needs. And remember, it's sexy to support Australian-made products. Everyone here at Send It Mate uses High Caliber, and we can promise you that it'll keep your firearms free from those pesky gun STDs.